First of all, if you want to believe everything the floor manager just said about how wonderful this amendment is before us, then I guess you're also going to believe that there might be such a thing as pixie dust. The floor manager also wanted to cite some numbers from 2024, and he can do that. But he also needs to mention that those numbers will not occur unless the triggers kick in. And of course, there's two triggers, that revenues have to grow to $8.3 billion, and there has to be 4% growth. Now, in the committee, we asked the floor manager of this bill how likely it was that those triggers would actually be enacted, that they'd go forward. And his response was that it was not very likely. So to quote numbers for out year 2024 is certainly misleading and disingenuous. You know, Democrats started this session out by promising to work in a bipartisan way to support tax reform. And we had 4 basic principles that we laid out, and that was that we want to make that tax system more fair for working families and small business, that we wanted to make our businesses more competitive, that we needed to take into account our current budget crisis, and that we wanted to tackle corporate giveaways, which is, as you well know, the fastest growing part of our state budget. But there's 2 other things that we need to keep in mind when we look at tax policy. It's whether or not we are going to be supporting the next generation and the families that are raising that generation today, and whether or not it is fiscally responsible. By all of the measures I just mentioned, the bill before us fails. So why do I say that? Well, Senator Hogue has already outlined a number of those reasons, so I'm going to just break that down just a little bit further. So out of the median income families in this state, those are the people that are around $55,000 a year. So half of all Iowa families live on less than $55,000 a year. That family will see a savings of $2.25 a week. A candy bar. A candy bar. The millionaire, as Senator Hogue has pointed out, $18,773 tax cut each year, breaks down to about $373 a week. You are spending Iowa's working families' hard-earned money to provide a tax cut to some of the wealthiest people in this state. Now, I don't want to take anything away from them, but if we have to start providing support for people who are truly living very, very well, and in some instances a life of luxury, while many of our working families are struggling week to week, month to month, just to put food on the table and make the rent or make the house payment, something is really, really wrong with this tax policy. It's also been mentioned that a good chunk of the money, about $28 million, is going to leave the state of Iowa to people who live out of state but may work here. So, why do I believe that this does not make Iowa's businesses more competitive? Does nothing to get rid of federal deductibility. Nothing. In fact, it adds a whole new deduction for businesses called the Qualified Business Income Deduction. And in case some of you may have missed it, earlier this week, an organization called Businesses for Responsible Tax Reform paid for a full-page ad in the Des Moines Register. And it says, don't believe the hype. Trump's tax law does nothing for real small businesses. And it goes on to say that 44% of the new deduction being sold as helping small businesses will go to about 200,000 individuals nationally, making more than $1 million, according to the nonpartisan Joint Committee on Taxation. 69% of small business owners say the tax law won't help them hire or give raises, according to a scientific public opinion poll by Businesses for Responsible Reform, where most respondents self-identified as Republican. They go on to say this is not something small business owners will forget. The only reason I bring this up is because that same deduction, that new deduction, is also included in this package and is being sold as something that's going to be this great messiah, whatever, for Iowa's small business community. I wish it were true. This plan does not take into account our current budget crisis, as Senator Hogue has already pointed out. You know, this year we approved $32 million to educate 500,000 Iowa children. The bill before you will give 9,400 Iowans making more than $1 million, $62 million. $32 million to educate 500,000 children in Iowa, $62 million for 9,400 millionaires. Nor does the bill before us tackle the corporate tax breaks, the fastest growing part of our budget. There'll be a study next year sometime. I want to also mention one other thing, because it appears that we failed to learn history's lessons. I've been here a while. I was back here in the 90s when there was a 10% across-the-board income tax cut and a huge break or cut in inheritance taxes. Well, lo and behold, about 5 years after that, the Department of Revenue, not me, not the Legislative Service Agency, the Department of Revenue, they did an analysis. And they did the analysis because, for some reason, Iowa's growth was lagging behind all other states. And they couldn't figure out what the heck was going on. I mean, the promise and the belief back then was that if you cut taxes, it was going to stimulate growth, the tax cuts would pay for themselves, and we would just be this rosy fiscal picture in the state of Iowa. Didn't happen. And they couldn't figure out why. So Michael Lipsman, who worked for the Department of Revenue at the time, in the Tax Research and Program Analysis section, delved into it to find out what was going on. So bear with me, I'm going to read just little excerpts from it. And if you want to read it, the whole thing, you're more than welcome to come over and take it from my desk and read the whole document. The question, why did Iowa's economy all of a sudden begin to slow down in 1998 while the remainder of the nation continued to grow at the same rate as during the prior 5 years? The only significant event that occurred that year that distinguished Iowa from the remainder of the nation was the implementation of tax cuts enacted during 97 and 98. The slowdown remained modest during 1998, but as stated earlier, the revenue impacts of most of the tax cuts did not start showing up until near the middle of 1998, and not some until the spring of 99. Goes on to say, much of the benefits of the individual income tax cuts were realized by high-income taxpayers. For example, over 24% of the savings resulting from the 10% individual income tax rate reduction was realized by 3% of taxpayers with $100,000 of more of adjusted gross income. And it goes on to say, as a result, it is likely much of the tax savings that realized from the 98 individual tax cuts got invested outside of Iowa. Newsweek, about 3 weeks ago, did an article on President Trump's tax cut. And you are more than welcome to this as well. An analysis of Fortune 500 companies found that corporations have spent 37 times more on stock buybacks than on American workers' bonuses and wages. The bottom line is that foreigners own a large chunk of U.S. corporations and will get a big windfall. Sound familiar? I was here in 99 and 2000. In fact, that's when Tom Vilsack became governor. Our revenue growth was negative. We took in less money in 99, 2000, 2001 than we did the previous year. It did not stimulate the economy because the tax cuts were geared to the very highest income earners. The tax cuts were not geared to Main Street. So, members, what we're doing here today is going to have tremendous fiscal impact on this state for years to come. Now, we may get that $2.25 a week income tax cut so I can go out and buy another candy bar, and Lord knows my hips don't need another candy bar. And at the same time, I'm going to spend another $1 a week in additional sales tax, because this bill also increases sales tax at the same time that it's reducing income tax. So I'm going to get $2.25 a week for my candy bar, and I'm going to spend another $1 a week on additional sales tax. And let's not forget that we have one more bill on our calendar to do today, and that is to renege on a promise the state made to local governments to backfill lost property tax dollars from the commercial industrial property tax bill that was enacted in 2013. So if that also becomes law today, where we renege on $150 million that we promised to local governments, our constituents are going to see an increase in their property taxes. They're going to pay more in sales, they're going to pay more in property tax, and they're going to get a small income tax cut that, quite frankly, I don't believe is going to even come close to the other two increases. At the same time, for those families who are getting this $2.25 a week, are going to end up spending at least $500 more to send their kids to one of our universities. We have an obligation. We have a duty. We have a duty to the next generation. The generations that came before us sacrificed, helped us all get where we are today, and we have the same duty. We have the same duty to invest in today's children. If we fail to do that, this state is in a world of hurt. We have a duty and obligation to meet the essential needs and services of our people. That's why we're here. Public safety, education, mental health services, healthcare services, investments in making sure that the next generation of workers has the skills they need. Members, I wish this tax bill was something I could support today. I do. But I cannot vote for something that I know is going to create long-term structural deficits for this state and its inability to meet the essential needs of our citizens. And at the same time, asked Iowa's working families to spend their hard-earned money on tax breaks for Iowa's wealthiest. Please vote no.